In this next segment, we're going to go through 25 brand new questions based off of our new practice exam and vocabulary booklet, available now on Amazon. Links in the description below. It's killer. 400 amazing questions. We've been working on this for years and years and years and years. We've stripped away all of the fat so you can get some of the best questions to help you get through that real estate examination. Now, without further ado, check out these 25 questions. Bam. Question number 1. A property that has limited utility and marketability other than for its specific single-purpose use is a... Letter A, tax-exempt property. Letter B, riparian property. Letter C, special use property. Letter D, homestead property. Question number 1. A property that has limited utility and marketability other than for its specific single-purpose use is a... And the answer is... Letter C, special use property. Okay, so a couple things here. There was a few like red herrings, kind of threw you off. Homestead property. A homestead is a vocab phrase that you're going to see on real estate examinations. You just need to know what homestead is and what homestead exemption is. Depending on the state that you're taking this in, it's going to help you. And, again, these are national practice questions, so they are good basically everywhere. But there might be some state-specific rules and regulations regarding homestead exemptions, like there is, here in our state, which is Massachusetts. Riparian property. It's not real. So riparian rights are water rights, remember. And then we have a special use property. Tax exempt properties, you learn about tax exempt status in real estate courses. So it could be like a school, public park, that kind of thing. Those are tax exempt or government properties. And then special use properties are properties in which we are using limited utility and marketability other than its specific single purpose use. Question number 2. The federal law that regulates the advertisement of a lender's terms, including rates and fees, is... Letter A, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Letter B, RESPA. Letter C, CERCLA. Letter D, Regulation Z. The federal law that regulates the advertisement of a lender's terms, including rates and fees, is... And the answer is... Letter D, Regulation Z. All right, so you're going to want to know a couple of these elements here. So first off, you need to know what all of these are. All of these are legit things. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act is an anti-discrimination law. It affects lenders, and we need to know things like what are the protected classes under the federal ECOA, et cetera. Those kinds of things. You learn about those inside of the real estate courses. RESPA stands for the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. RESPA is a consumer protection law that goes kind of hand in hand with Regulation Z, and those two make up the TRID rule, the TILA-RESPA Integrated Disclosure Rule. So you need to know what RESPA is. It's for settlement services, and you learn about it in the closing and settlement sections in books, and you'll learn it as sort of a Settlement Procedures Act. And then the final one here is something called CERCLA. CERCLA is the environmental law, the big federal environmental law, also known as, you learn it as the Superfund law. Superfund law. So this comprehensive environmental Response, Compensation, and Liabilities Act. It's a mouthful, but is also known as AKA the Superfund. Now, the federal law that regulates advertisements of lenders and their terms, including rates and fees, is all day long Regulation Z, which is also known as the Truth in Lending Act. So that's something else you do want to know, that Regulation Z is also referred to as TILA, or the Truth in Lending Act. Question number 3. Which of the following are all elements of a valid contract? Letter A, purchase price, property description, financing terms, inspection period. Letter B, negotiation, due diligence, closing costs, title insurance. Letter C, offer, acceptance, consideration, legality. Letter D, property location, real estate agent, home inspection, and financing approval. Which of the following are all elements of a valid contract? And the answer is letter C, offer, acceptance, consideration, and legality. So one of the main important things that we need to learn in contracts is the validity of contracts. What makes a contract valid? What makes a contract void? And there's 5 essential elements to make a contract valid. An offer and acceptance, consideration, and legality are all of these items that go into that 5. So we want to know what the 5 elements are for a valid contract. And you want to know that letter C is the basics: offer, acceptance, consideration, legality. And you just want to make sure that you have these elements in order to have a valid contract. Question number 4. A 1,900 square foot home with 5 bedrooms and only 1 bathroom suffers from what condition? Letter A, incurable physical deterioration. Letter B, curable physical deterioration. Letter C, functional obsolescence. Letter D, economic obsolescence. A 1,900 square foot home with 5 bedrooms and only 1 bathroom suffers from which type of condition? And the answer is letter C, functional obsolescence. So we want to know a couple of things. When it comes down to depreciation, you learn about this in the appraisals units in your books. And you learn about the 3 types of depreciation: physical, functional, and economic or external. And you want to know a little bit about what the word functional obsolescence means. And this home here, having 5 bedrooms and only 1 bathroom, it's suffering from this function of requiring more bathrooms to accommodate the significant amount of bedrooms. So that's functional obsolescence. If it were something physical, painting and these types of things, upkeep, repairs, replacing windows, those would all be physical deteriorations, and those are curable or incurable. And then if you're ever asked a question about external or economic obsolescence, that one is always incurable. External forces reducing the value of the asset or depreciating the asset. But in this particular case, that's functional obsolescence all day long, and that's a vocab phrase you definitely want to know. Question number 5. In a multiple offer situation in real estate, why is timeliness important when handling offers and counteroffers? Letter A, to give buyers more time to improve their offers. Letter B, to ensure the contract's validity and enforceability. Letter C, to allow the seller to consider offers indefinitely. Letter D, to create a sense of urgency for the buyers. In a multiple offer situation in real estate, why is timeliness important when handling offers and counteroffers? And the answer is letter B, to ensure the contract's validity and enforceability. So in multiple offer situations, we definitely want to know that timeliness is something that is of paramount interest. And, one of the big reasons why is to ensure that the contract's validity and enforceability. If there are specific time delineations in a contract, you want to make sure that you're adhering to those. And they help to enforce the validity of the contract, to make sure that there was an intent to contract. So these are things that you want to kind of understand. Again, a little bit more advanced is the logic of the intent to contract. That's more sort of a legal premise when you're looking at it from that capacity. But the reality here is you definitely want to know a little bit about offers and counteroffers and multiple offer scenarios. And these are all important as you're learning contracts in real estate. Question number 6. Which of the following is the least likely to be considered a material fact? Letter A, a roof that leaked during a storm one time but hasn't since. Letter B, if the seller knows that a condo complex will be replacing the wooded lot behind the property. Letter C, that the current owners bought the house knowing it is believed to be haunted. Letter D, an outdated electrical system that the seller does not want to replace. Which of the following is the least likely to be considered a material fact? And the answer is letter C, that the current owner bought the house knowing it is believed to be haunted. All right, so material facts here are anything. So even if the roof leaked once during the storm, it is something that could be material in nature, that could be some hidden latent defect that might have been caused from that one-time leak. So we do definitely need to disclose it if it obviously comes to memory. But it's important to note that that is a material fact. If the seller knows that a condo complex will be replacing the wooded lot behind the property, that's a pretty significant amount of information. You know, maybe they are going to be building more residential housing or commercial influence or something directly behind the property. There was this pristine view, and now that's going away. So it's kind of important that we want to know that. The outdated electrical system that the seller does not want to replace, knowledge of the fact that the electrical system is outdated is material in nature for sure. And then the haunting, as you may remember or may not, in many real estate courses you learn about stigmatized or psychologically impacted property conditions. My apologies. And those are items that many times don't need to be disclosed unless specifically asked in the states that you're in. So you just want to know a little bit about the psychologically impacted property conditions and stigmatized properties, and these are definitely items that you want to know for your examination. Question number 7. The taxes on a home are $2,878.50 and are paid in advance. If the closing is scheduled for October 30th and the buyer owns the closing date, what is the debit or credit at closing? Letter A, $496.82 credit to the seller. Letter B, $496.82 credit to the buyer. Letter C, $2,381.57 credit to the seller. Letter D, $2,381.57 credit to the buyer. The taxes on a home are $2,878.50 and are paid in advance. If the closing is scheduled for October 30th and the buyer owns the date of closing, what is the debit or credit at closing? If the closing is scheduled for October 30th and the buyer owns the closing date, what is the debit or credit at closing? And the answer is letter A, $496.82 credit to the seller. All right. Without a doubt, we need to know about prorations, and taxes are probably one of the ones that you're going to see. So we need to know that, what being paid in advance means versus what is being paid in arrears. So you want to know those phrases. And you also want to know a little bit about how the debit and credit items work on the exam. And you're going to see multiple examples. Our book's going to definitely have it as well. So don't forget, we're going to cover that for you. And you also see it in your real estate courses. But here, let's cut to the explanation so you can get an idea of how I would go through a question like this and kind of break it down. So let's cut to that right now, and we'll see you on the other side. Okay, let's take a look at the solution to that math question. The taxes on a home are $2,878.50 and are paid in advance, which means we paid it up front, right? If the closing is scheduled for October 30th and the buyer owns the closing date, that means that they are responsible for the closing date. Whatever is owed for the taxes, they're responsible for. Then what is the debit or credit at closing? So how do we do this? Step number 1 is we find the daily rate. $2,878.50, that's the entire year's taxes, divided by 365 gives us $7.886 per day. Sometimes test writers want you to round, sometimes they want you to use the exact number. Step number 2 is we find out how many days the buyer will own the property. So, to October 30th, November which is 31, and then December. So basically what we're looking at is there's 2 days in October, there's 30 days in November, if we're using a 365-day calendar, and then there's 31 days in December. So you do need to remember that, 30 days of September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31. And then so you need to remember those dates. So if it's using a 365, then we have to do that. Sometimes they might say use a 360-day calendar, 30 days, making it much easier for the math. Sometimes they're going to make you do it 365 if you're prorating. So read the question and see what they want you to do. So basically we had 2 days left because we know when they were closing, right? So because they owned the day of closing, that's the 30th. And then the 31st, which is 2 days. And then November has 30 days. And then December has 31 days. If you add all of those up, that gives you 63 days. Then you take the 63 times $7.886, and that gives you $496.818. We round up to $496.82, and that's a credit to the seller. Why is it credit? Because the seller prepaid for the taxes. So it's a debit to the buyer and a credit to the seller. Go through this a few times and play with it. The real epiphany will be when you can figure out how many days are left over, who gets the day of closing. That means if we're closing on the 30th, whoever gets the day of closing is obligated to pay that day. And how many days do we have during the month? On the 365, you have to memorize that, and then you should be good to go. Then prorations are actually kind of there's a catharsis to it. There's like this therapy to it. It's really, really nice. All the numbers kind of line up, and you're like, that feels so satisfying to get that one. So just work on prorations. You'll get them. You'll see them on examinations. They are not that hard, and people just freak out about them all the time. Practice, 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 and we'll see you in the next one. Question number 8. What are littoral rights associated with? Letter A, properties abutting moving water. Letter B, properties abutting non-moving bodies of water. Letter C, properties with mineral rights. Letter D, properties with any water rights. What are littoral rights associated with? And the answer is letter B, properties abutting non-moving bodies of water. Okay, so we definitely want to know water rights for real estate examinations. What are littoral rights? What are riparian rights? What is the doctrine of prior appropriation? What does the average high water mark mean? And what does to the center thread of the waterway mean? Don't forget littoral rights, like they mentioned here. Think of L littoral or the O in littoral for oceans and Great Lakes. And so littoral rights are properties abutting or next to, that's what abutting means, non-moving bodies of water. I mean, all water is moving, so they don't mean it like that. But they mean it like, it's just non-flowing, like rushing, that kind of stuff. Now, riparian rights, the opposite ones, deal with flowing bodies of water. So that's an easy one to remember. Think of riparian R, river. Rivers are flowing. So riparian rights deal with flowing bodies of water, and littoral rights deal with non-moving bodies of water. Question number 9. What is a defining characteristic of a tenancy at will? Letter A. It has a specific lease term including lease length and rent price. Letter B. It can be terminated at any time through an agreement between the landlord and the tenant. Letter C. It can be terminated at any time by either the landlord or the tenant. Letter D, it can be transferred from one tenant to another within the time frame of the original lease. What is a defining characteristic of a tenancy at will? And the answer is letter C, it can be terminated at any time by either the landlord or the tenant. And sort of to add to that, it can be terminated at any time with reasonable notice is usually the other thing that many times you didn't see in this question, but many times in many states it's within 30 days of notice in writing, and so that you can terminate within that period. Now it's different in different states, but you want to sort of know a little bit about what a tenancy at will is, what a tenant at sufferance is, what a holdover tenant is, what a tenant for the years is, and what a periodic tenancy is. And all of those are the different types of leasehold estates that you learn about in real estate courses. And this is a good question. A straight at bat, what is a tenancy at will? Good to know. Question number 10. What is the primary goal of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? Letter A, to provide insurance for mortgages backed by the government. Letter B, to provide liquidity and stability to the mortgage market. Letter C, to keep home loans out of the secondary mortgage market. Letter D, none of the above. What is the primary goal of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? And the answer is letter B, to provide liquidity and stability to the mortgage markets. Okay, so Fannie Mae, it's going to stand for the Federal National Mortgage Association, and Freddie Mac is the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation. Those are two things you definitely want to know. Fannie Mae is the larger of the two. They're both secondary mortgage market players. So what they do is they buy loans from the primary mortgage market, the primary lenders, and then they take those loans and bundle them together, and they make giant pools of loans, and they slice them all up and sell off pieces to investors, and they create something called mortgage-backed securities. If you take one of my courses, oh my goodness, are you going to learn all about secondary market activities? I go really deep into the water here, and then in some 101 classes, I won't even touch the surface because it can get so deep and crazy. But it's definitely important to know some basics about secondary mortgage market. Easy test question territory on exams, as long as you can remember who these players are and sort of what they do and what they create, and you're good to go. So Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae, secondary mortgage market, they buy loans from the primary market, and they create mortgage-backed securities, which are later sold off to other investors. Question number 11. What is the primary purpose of the habendum clause in lease contracts? Letter A, to define the lessee's rights, types of interest, and ownership details. Letter B, to outline the financial terms of the contract. Letter C, to specify the location of the property. Letter D, to establish the duration of the contract. What is the primary purpose of the habendum clause in a lease? And the answer is letter A, to define the lessee's rights, types of interest, and ownership details. All right, the habendum clause is the to have and to hold clause. That's if you were to define it. That's what habendum means. You have habendum clause in the deed, and you have habendum clauses in other contracts and documents of officiality. And what they simply mean is when you have habendum, it's just to have and to hold. So to have and to hold what? And when it comes to real property, in a lease, it's to have and to hold what are your interests? What are the lessee's rights, the type of interest that they're receiving, and the ownership details of this particular lease contract. And you'll also see this in a deed. So, in a deed, it could be a freehold estate. In a lease, it's going to be a leasehold estate. It could say a leasehold estate as a tenancy at will, and you get these types of interests and these ownership details and blah, blah, blah. But it's always starts off with the habendum clause. So it says, blah, 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 to have and to hold. And then to have and to hold is like sort of the spotlight that turns on. Everything coming immediately after that is going to identify the type of interest that the lessee is receiving. Question number 12. A promissory note illustrates letter A, assets. Letter B, debt. Letter C, hypothecation. Letter D, amortization. A promissory note illustrates. And the answer is letter B, debt. All right, so the promissory note is the debt instrument. So that's what they call it many times. And with a promissory note, hand in hand many times goes a mortgage, which is another document, and that indicates the security instrument. So a mortgage is the security instrument, and the promissory note indicates the debt and the obligation to repay. And it kind of spells out the terms and conditions that both parties sort of have to come to when it comes down to determining this. So that's sort of the difference between the two. And you want to make sure that you know that for your exam. Question number 13. The Sherman antitrust laws, which are designed to protect buyers and sellers from unfair competition and predatory business practices, prohibit competing brokers from letter A, group boycotting of other competing brokers. Letter B, price fixing, fees, or services. Letter C, geographically dividing the market to decrease competition. Or letter D, all of the above. The Sherman antitrust laws, which are designed to protect buyers and sellers from unfair competition and predatory business practices, prohibit competing brokers from, and the answer is letter D, all of the above. All right, so Sherman Antitrust Act, definitely on exams. Things that you want to know, the basics are allocation of customers in marketplaces, price fixing, and group boycotting. And those are the three big ones that you typically see on exams. And you don't need to know much more about that with Sherman, so kind of keep it brief, but do learn about it because it's something that you guys are definitely going to see. Question number 14. Which of the following rights refer to the rights to physically occupy and control the property? Is it letter A, exclusion? Is it letter B, disposition? Is it letter C, enjoyment? Letter D, possession. Which of the following rights refer to the rights to physically occupy and control the property? And the answer is letter D, possession. So the bundle of legal rights are simple, but you want to know these for exams: the right of possession, the right of control, the right of enjoyment, the right of disposition, the right of exclusion. And the right of possession here is the answer to this question: which of the following rights, the bundle of rights, that's what they're talking about there, or equitable title, refer to the rights to physically occupy and control the property? And that is the right of possession. Question number 15. A bill of sale is provided in order to, letter A, transfer ownership of personal property. Letter B, record the satisfaction of mortgage. Letter C, terminate a joint tenancy agreement. Letter D, none of the above. A bill of sale is provided in order to, and the answer is letter A, transfer ownership of personal property. So remember, a bill of sale is to personal property or chattel or personalty, as a deed is to realty or real estate or real property. So we want to know that when we're transferring ownership of real property, that's a deed. So that's like the receipt. The deed is the receipt to a piece of real estate. And for any other personal property effects, like this microphone, for instance, then there's going to be some kind of a receipt that evidences I own it. And we call the receipt, in the fancy word, the bill of sale. So the bill of sale is to personal property. Question number 16. The main objective of residential zoning is, letter A, to create a well-balanced community. Letter B, rent stabilization. Letter C, to promote commercial business growth. Letter D, all of the above. The main objective of residential zoning is, and the answer, letter A, to create a well-balanced community. So the main objective of residential zoning, if it was more of a general question saying the main objective of zoning, then we could also argue that, zoning to promote commercial business growth and rent stabilization. So it could be a little bit more of a general answer. It could have been the all of the above, possibly, depending on how the question was framed. But in this particular specific, we're only talking about residential zoning, and it's really, at the end of the day, is to create a well-balanced community. Question number 17. What is the primary purpose of underwriting in real estate finance? Letter A, to determine the property's market value. Letter B, to set the interest rate for the mortgage. Letter C, to determine the borrower's credit score. Letter D, to assess the risk associated with lending money to a borrower. What is the primary purpose of underwriting in real estate finance? And the answer is Letter D, to assess the risks associated with lending money to a borrower. So the primary purpose of underwriting, generally speaking, is to assess risk. And what the underwriter or the loan processor will do is that they'll go through and they'll look at the credit, and they won't set the interest rate for the mortgage, but based off of the borrower's qualifications, then the lender can determine the interest rate appropriate for the borrower, higher risk, higher rate, potentially, that kind of thing. To determine the borrower's credit score and to determine the property's market value are functions that actually happen within the underwriting process. But the primary purpose is what this test is asking you for, the question, and that's really to assess risk overall about the borrower in terms of if the lender is willing to take on this risk or not. Question number 18. What does EPA stand for? Letter A, the Eviction Protection Act. Letter B, Environmental Protection Agency. Letter C, Easement Providing Access. Letter D, Environment Protection Act. What does EPA stand for? And the answer is letter B, Environmental Protection Agency. So the EPA stands for the Environmental Protection Agency. It is the enforcement division that oversees environmental issues in the United States. It's the sort of the governing body. And each state will have its own environmental protection agency that works within its state. And for example, some states might call it the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection. And the big one, the federal level, is the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and they enforce laws like CERCLA, and they oversee the Superfund. And you need to know about EPA because it's a good potential question that you might see come up on an exam. Question number 19. Which of the following is not likely to contribute to market conditions being considered a seller's market? Letter A, a large distribution company opening a new headquarters nearby. Letter B, limited new construction homes in the area. Letter C, limited existing home inventory. Letter D, readily available residentially zoned vacant land and low cost for building materials. Which of the following is not likely to contribute to the market conditions being considered a seller's market? And the answer is letter D, readily available, residentially zoned, vacant land, and low cost for building material. Okay, so the idea here is what in other words would contribute towards a seller's market versus a buyer's market. And a buyer's market would be letter D. In a buyer's market, there'd be readily available, residentially zoned, vacant land, so abundance of land and very low cost to build on the land. And if you have that, low interest rates and so on, then you really have the ability for a buyer to be way more flexible in what they want and would make that an example of a buyer's market. The other three were seller's markets. So in this question, one of the things I would have approached it as is I would have, in other words, really understood what the question was first and say, okay, what it's looking for is, well, I guess then what is a seller's market? And then it's looking for the thing that's not in the seller's market. And then I would flip my mind script and say, well, then which of these three are supporting a seller's market? And the first three would absolutely support a seller's market, improving the value of the seller's asset in or under these conditions. So you want to read these carefully. This is a great question that kind of draws it out a little bit and gets students all the time on exam scenarios. So watch out for ones like this. This was a good one. Question number 20. What is the definition of escheat? Letter A, one property owner violating another's rights by building or extending a structure over their neighbor's property line. Letter B, occupying land belonging to another person with the intention of possessing it as one's own. Letter C, the right of government to take ownership of assets or unclaimed property when an individual dies without a will. Letter D, a claim against an asset by an entity that is not the owner, including but not limited to mortgages, easements, and liens. What is the definition of escheat? And the answer is letter C, the right of the government to take ownership of assets or unclaimed property when an individual dies without a will. And remember, when they die without a will, they die intestate. So one of the jobs of the student is to be able to connect these words. Without will, another way we could say that is intestate. So you want to think about words that play in that way, and then kind of, as you're studying your vocab, understand that there's these connections, and you definitely want to do that. I would have also approached this question by reading all of the answers first to get an idea of what they are and say, well, what is this definition of? And what is this definition of? And what is this definition of? And letter C, I would have been like, oh yeah, wow, that's escheat. So this is one of those straight up vocab phrases, long-winded answers. So it'll tire out the student. So make sure that you're like, oh, well, what is escheat? What am I looking for? They also might have two answers that are very similar. One could say without a will, and one could say with a will. Unlike how we did in this question. So they could be very, very, hey, we'll get you down to 50-50, but then we're going to catch you. Do you remember if escheat is intestate or testate? And they might use those words. So again, be very aware at these games that test writers will play. They're just trying to catch you. I'm sure it's nothing contentious, or maybe it is in some instances. You don't know. So you just want to make sure you're prepared, keep working, and we'll see you in the next one. Question number 21. Which of the following is not a common contract contingency in real estate? Letter A, the appraisal contingency. Letter B, closing date contingency. Letter C, financing contingency. Letter D, home inspection contingency. Which of the following is not a common contract contingency in real estate? And the answer is letter B, closing date contingency. Well, so what I would do is I would go backwards, and again, this would be me reading through the answers. An appraisal contingency is very normal. Financing contingencies are exceptionally normal, and home inspection contingencies are also exceptionally normal. So I would say, well, those three are pretty standard issued items. A closing date contingency is definitely a possibility, but it isn't as standard. So like in this case, all of these are theoretically real, but what you want to remember is this is asking you what is not. And I over enunciated not when I read the question. I will do that many times, and I think you ought to as well in your mind. Over enunciate these words to make sure if they're using these caps, they want you to really, it's supposed to pull you in and go, well, what do they want here? So just be aware of that. Good question. We'll see you in the next one. Question number 22. The primary purpose of the Truth in Lending Act is to letter A, control interest rates. Letter B, protect consumers. Letter C, protect consumers and financial institutions. Letter D, protect financial institutions. The primary purpose of the Truth in Lending Act is to, and the answer is letter B, protect consumers. Okay, so Truth in Lending Act, Regulation Z, or TILA, all the same thing, is a consumer protection law. So is RESPA, the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. So is the Fair Housing Act. So is the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. So is CERCLA. All of these have an element of consumer protection. And as a matter of fact, if you just think of it that way, all of the laws that you're typically learning about in real estate is for the benefit of the consumer. You'll be okay. Are there exceptions? Sure there are. But again, you're not trying to get like 100%. You're just trying to get through this thing so you can get your license. So just remember that. All of these laws are consumer protection laws. All right, they protect consumers. And that's a good generalization that you can make for exams like this. Question number 23. Which of the following involves offering an asset of value in exchange for a loan? Letter A, hypothecation. Letter B, due diligence. Letter C, proof of funds. Letter D, concession. Question number 23. Which of the following involves offering an asset of value in exchange for a loan? And the answer, letter A, hypothecation. Hypothecation is definitely a vocab phrase that y'all all are going to need to know for this exam. So add it to your vocab list, add it to your flashcards, whatever you're doing. Because these are going to be something that you're going to see. So hypothecation is for sure on there. And basically that's the process of offering an asset, pledging a piece of collateral in exchange for security for a loan. And to get a loan, that's called hypothecation. And the security instrument that we use is either a deed of trust or a mortgage. And you learn that in your finance sections of your books. Good question, simple and straight to it. Question number 24. In a special agency relationship in real estate, what is the typical scope of an agent's authority? Letter A, handling multiple ongoing tasks. Letter B, representing both buyer and seller. Letter C, managing all aspects of a property continuously. Letter D, limited to a single specific duty. In a special agency relationship in real estate, what is the typical scope of the agent's authority? And the answer is letter D, limited to a single specific duty. So interesting here, managing all aspects of a property continuously, they were kind of fishing here for like, is this potentially a property manager representing both buyer and seller? What's happening here? And handling multiple ongoing tasks. And the reality here is in a special agency relationship, as opposed to general agency relationships, what is the typical scope of the agent's authority? And it's always limited to a single specific duty. Okay. So this was a general question where some of the answers could smell kind of correct and this could trap, but this was the most correct answer, letter D here. So as you are learning, make sure you're looking for those things, like what are the most correct answers, and they'll guide you and serve you well. Question number 25. A seller includes a home warranty as part of the sales of their home. Which of the following would not be covered? Letter A, a central air conditioning condenser unit. Letter B, a furnace that was 25 years old at the time of the sale. Letter C, a roof that is damaged by overhanging tree branches that fell in a storm. Letter D, a 2-year-old refrigerator that has its own manufacturer's warranty. A seller includes a home warranty as part of the sale of their home. Which of the following would not be covered? And the answer is letter C, a roof that is damaged by overhanging tree branches that fell in the storm. So home warranties are covering the personal property effects inside of the home. So refrigerators, furnaces, central air conditioners, all of these have some function of a home warranty. As a value add, many times sellers might include in certain parts of the country a home warranty as an incentive for the buyer to consider buying their home versus comparing it to somebody else's home. A warranty is kind of a nice thing to have. Read the warranty to make sure that you understand the nature and consequences of it, obviously. But the roof that is damaged, those things would be a different type of insurance, hazard insurance, property casualty insurance. Other types of insurance would be useful here in those particular situations, depending on the storm and depending on what happens, of course. Excellent question. All right. That concludes our 25 questions as a sample of our new book, available now on Amazon. Link in the description below. It's available on our storefront as well. We put a lot of time into this book, and it took me 20 years of messing around with different question types and different things to boil it down to give you 400 excellent questions. There's 300 vocab phrases in here that you can practice with. There's some word matching. It's an excellent little companion piece. We've been giving these out to some of our students that we've been training before we've released the book, and they've been passing the examination and giving us really good feedback. So check it out. We'd love you to check it out. If you do, and you found some use out of it, please comment below. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. We have tons of free videos to help our students learn. It's a pleasure to see you get your real estate licenses. When you do, share with us. We love to hear that stuff. It really, really makes us happy. The point of this channel is to help people learn about real estate. So good luck with your studies. Good luck on your exam. Check out our book. It's really cool. It would mean a lot to us. And we'll see you in the next one.